Good morning, America, and good morning, Michigan. Welcome to Finding the Middle Sunday edition, right here on the Middle Ground mic. Before we dive in, I want you to do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, follow us on platforms, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. And please comment as you watch this, even if it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us some feedback. Tell us what you want to hear. Even pushback. If you don't agree with us, let us know. It's about finding facts, solutions, and trying to find the middle. And finding the middle doesn't just mean you have to have a balanced opinion. Sometimes you have an opinion, you kind of got to find a way to get there, right? We've got a little bit of a pack show today. Michigan's latest budget and the infrastructure moves to, and then to national headlines shaping our economy and national security. We're going to cut through the spin and break it all down together. If you're ready for honesty, debate, in a community, and some great coffee, stay around. All right, Michigan's budget deal. We're going to spotlight the state. $15 billion is earmarked for education, but but the controversy is how it's split between public schools and charters. What they're saying on a local impact level is, downriver district cuts and new vocational program funding. They got to make sure that they're prioritizing certain types of education for kids, and that is up for debate. And I think it is spread out, not completely finalized on that aspect yet. They're talking a little bit about the I-75 modernization project. Right? Billions are being spent because of delays. That's been a long-standing issue in the state of Michigan. Delays, delays, delays. It seems like the roads are never fixed. Seems like they're working on the same parts of 75 and 94 and 96, like forever. Like, I get it. They got to do things, but it's like they fix it. Then 4 or 5 years later, they got to like fix it again. And it always seems like the same areas, right? And I get that high traffic. I understand we have one of the higher weight restrictions. We allow higher weights on our roads compared to most states. I think we're either the highest or one of the highest in the nation, which contributes to the deterioration of the roads, which, I think in that part, okay, do we look at maybe these companies need to pay a little bit extra if they're the ones shipping these products to help us contribute to our roads and not just sticking it to the middle class or the poor or even heck, even the lower rich, if you've got a company and you're contributing more per se to that road, being, eroded over time through wear and tear, we have to look at some different things, right? We can talk about the gas tax revenue, right? It's falling as EVs are rising. So how do we fund the roads long term? From my understanding, one good thing, or not one good thing, one thing that they're doing is they're looking at those little devices you can put in your car, track how many mileage you drive. I don't like that. Maybe slapping something out of registration, I think might be a little bit more feasible. Listen, I'm anti-tax like the next guy, but if you want roads and things like that, they got to be paid for. It all has to be paid for. Or maybe tax somebody that has a different way that has a charging station built in their house. Okay, now you pay a different tax to help fund the roads because even though you're using an electric car, you're still wearing down the roads. Um, they're talking about, downriver bridge road repairs. The budgets have been increased, but locals are frustrated at the timelines, right? Because it's taking too long. Again, taking too long to get things done. And then we're constantly fixing it because it's taking too long. The Van Horten Allen Bridge here is due, that project's kind of starting to take hold. You drive by there, you can see it. Everyday Michiganders are saying, hey, cost of living, the rent keeps going up. I've seen it kind of stabilize. Again, the utility hikes from DTE, I'm very critical of those because they keep rate hiking, and they're not like, there's not a significant amount of progress on the infrastructure improvements. And every time they say, well, this rate hike is going to really help us improve the infrastructure more. You keep saying that, but very few areas are seeing it where there's a significant amount of people. Maybe you're spending in certain areas that have a lot more money, but you're definitely not doing it where the masses live. Because if you are, I'm missing it. And I drive around the metro area a lot. And I'm not trying to be critical necessarily, DT. I'm just saying the money that they're quote unquote asking us to invest is not producing the results that they're promising. And they produced over $1 billion in profit. Why do you need to come back to us for more? If you're trying to raise 200 something $1 million, you got plenty of room. Apparently there's some negotiations going on between Ford and GM, and the impact on the jobs in Wayne County and Detroit from EVs. We're transitioning into battery plants, but there's also fears of automation replacing workers. I don't want to ever see a worker replaced, but if we get down to a point where it's like we either automate certain parts of the plant or that plant's got to close or go overseas, which I'm against, we really got to step back. Like, okay, how can we produce more to make it cost effective, right? So that way it works for the company and works for the worker. If you're from Michigan, I want to hear you. What's the biggest issue where you live? Drop it in the chat right now. And don't forget, if you believe in conversations that build bridges instead of walls, hit that like button and share. Let's talk a little bit about, the Federal Reserve. That's oof. Inflation is cooling, but the interest rates cut just once this year. But they're saying we should see another rate or two cut this year. But mortgage rates still really haven't cooled that much. They're still hovering around 6 or 7%. Our national debt is now past 35 trillion. Future implications for Gen Z and my generation, millennials. Technically, there's been phrases out there like my generation could be called Zennials because of the year I was born. But when we talk about standard of living, things like that, well, the higher the government debt is, the lower your purchasing power is. And what does that mean? That means that when you go to the store, that $20 buys less. It's not just about price hikes, right? You got to really look into it. Those price hikes also come from government debt not buying as much as, because the government can't buy as much as it used to. I believe this year we're right around as a nation at the federal level, we're paying $1 trillion in interest payments. $1 trillion could solve a whole lot of problems for the American people without raising taxes. So we have to figure out how to redo this debt. We have to figure out how to do that because 35 trillion is not sustainable at all. It's going to make us poorer and poorer. It's going to reduce our standard of living. More other countries are not wanting to buy our debt. And before we start going, ooh, well, a lot of those foreign countries buying our debt is why our government's able to sell debt and fund certain things. Um, you know, we talked a little bit about, is real immigration and border security able to be reformed without it being a perpetual political football? Like what supposedly is going on in Portland. A video the governor posted there last night made it seem simple, but I've also seen other videos, so I guess that's up in the air depending on who you like and who you view. They got in Texas, they're doing state funded measures, to try to help protect us, which I think states should have the right if they're on the border of Mexico or even Canada, but you really shouldn't need to do too much with Canada, but they should have the right to kind of adjust things and balance it based on what's in front of them. Republicans are divided on tariffs and foreign policy, right? I get where the Republicans are divided on the tariffs. I have said I like the tariffs for certain countries. Like we do need to go after we do need to go after situations like that. But when it comes like the Europeans and certain things like that, and even our allies and even certain aspects of China, it needs to be more of a measured approach to work for them and to work for us. Because in the end, we have to do what works for us. Well, we also have to meet China and all these other countries in the middle because it has to work for them too in order for them to come to the table. So we all have to do something, that's balanced. Foreign policy, I know, Trump has shifted his foreign policy on, Ukraine, and even he has come out and started to shift a little bit on Israel and kind of telling Israel they need to button up and maybe look at ending this thing. Putin's kind of thumbed his nose at Trump thinking he can tell him what to do. Well, now he's pushed Trump too far. And now Trump's backing Ukraine. Don't forget your coffee, okay? And I was all for that. I was all for, hey, let's try to do it. Let's try to do it before we go further. Okay, now he did what he was supposed to do. Putin keeps playing games. I mean, a lot of people said that he would. A lot of people felt that he would, and I get it. But we had to try to do the right thing first. Now, do whatever we can to support Ukraine, with short of dragging ourselves into conflict, like physically. That remains to be seen, right? Because that's a lot of money. Democrats are fractured between progressives and pushing for new leadership, and centers holding the line. My message to my Democratic friends is don't go far extreme, because first, look what it's doing to the GOP. And once Trump's not in the GOP, like in terms of aspirations, right? What's going to happen? It's going to be an extremely divided party, extremely divided, and that's going to be very painful for us. Well, not for us, but painful for the party. Don't go down that road. I know you guys got Project 2029 coming down the pipeline. Really look at that. Really look at being balanced. You can have some of your ideals, right? And you can be balanced, because here's the thing, and this is something that Republicans and Democrats need to hear. It is okay to be balanced. It is okay not to be loyal to one side. Remember, we're American citizens. It's not party before country. It's not Democrats before US citizens. It's not Republicans before US citizens. Stop that. Stop thinking because someone's a Democrat or Republican that they're automatically a bad person and their idea is automatically bad. Like, just stop that. Because the more we can stop that, the better. I did an episode yesterday I recorded with Lisa Ekman. Great lady. I mean, she's gonna be a regular on the show. She started or wrote a book called Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elite. Great book. Phenomenal lady. I mean, phenomenal. She was a former Democratic lobbyist. She worked for a couple senators. She's been a lawyer, done social stuff. I mean, you name it, she's pretty much done it. Independent and centers voters are now polling at over 40% of the electorate. Huge growth area, right? So those people are going to, depending on the issue, right? Well, now we got to work on finding the middle. That means 40% of the electorate identifies somewhere around here. 40% of the electorate in the United States is right around the middle. Let's embrace it. Let's bring more of those conversations to the table. It's a huge growth area. The politician, like America, needs to stop being so divided. We have a lot more in common than we think we do. I had seen some videos on Israel and Gaza. The conflict remains volatile. It's awful. Benjamin Netanyahu needs to back. Like, I get what happened, but at this point now, it's gone too far. Things have gone too far. Like, we need to figure out how to fix this, not occupy. Benjamin Netanyahu's now starting to talk about occupy. The international definition of genocide, he's now hit 4 of the 5 categories needed to define it. I'm not calling Israelis genocidal or that they do things like that, but Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have some of those tendencies that come out now and then. I know a lot of Jewish people, they are not like that, but Benjamin Netanyahu, he is dangerous. He is dangerous to the stability, he is dangerous to everything going on in this country. And if you value independent voices, call out both parties, even if it's your own party. Don't be afraid to say something. It's okay to be critical of somebody you voted for and even somebody you would vote for again. Because if not, how do we improve? Especially when they're wrong. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and share this podcast, this YouTube, X, whatever you're watching this on. Let's kind of talk about a little bit about how media is covering things, right? Border security versus reality. The numbers show record crossings in August, but you listen to certain conservative media, it says it's down. Is it or is it not? We really need to look at that. I think it's down significantly based on people that live down there and what I've seen posted online, but it could be wrong. Their inflation is under control now, but grocery prices are still up over 20-30% from 2019. But everybody's got to remember it's going to be very hard to get prices down to that level. It's terrible. But, they're saying 62% of Americans now are saying they don't trust either party to fix the economy. That's the vast majority of America. Economics is a social science. Our dollar, it's a fiat currency, right? So it relies on faith, the faith and credit of the United States government, right? And our own citizens are losing faith in this, which means if we lose faith in our dollar, it's going to weaken our economy even more. So our government needs to step up, shore up the debt, take care of the American citizens, balance things out, balance a budget like most states are required to do. Unless you're California, somehow they get away with it, and make these things better for the American people. If you strengthen the dollar, that $20 you bought is now going to be able to keep buying that amount of product. It's not going to dwindle as much, or it might even be able to buy more depending on the situation. Here in Michigan, 70% of people now are saying the roads are worse than they were 10 years ago. And that's very similar across the country. Very similar. Unless you're in Ohio, because Ohio is like this utopia for roads. But again, only 28% of people in this country think Washington can work across the aisle. And I agree with that 1,000%. A Republican could have the solution to fix everything in this country, make everybody happy, no poor ever again. Not that that's the reality. Democrats would automatically say it's bad. Democrats could have the same thing. The GOP would automatically say it's bad. That is pathetic. It is pathetic that we are to that point. I'm sorry, but it is. Here's the thing. The numbers don't lie, but politicians are spinning them. Our job as individuals, our job on the show is not about red or blue. Do I lean center right? Yes, I do, but I try to be balanced. Federally, I'm a conservative. State level, I'm a little bit more liberal. And it's about whether this policy is working for the people on Main Street and not just headlines. See how I didn't go after the rich here? It's either working for us or the corporate headlines. That's where you really got to go after it. You have to attack this stuff. As we kind of wrap this up here a little bit, I gave you a little bit more specifics. We've covered a lot today from Michigan roads, schools to America's debt, our foreign policy, talking about 2029 a little bit. And here's the bottom line: finding the middle isn't easy, but it's necessary for our own futures. And if you believe in this movement, here's how you can help. Subscribe to the Middle Ground Mike on YouTube, follow us on Spotify or Apple, leave us some comments, leave us reviews, rate us. We need engagement. Share this with 2 to 3 friends who are sick of partisan spin. They're just sick. They're tuned out because they're tired of hearing about it. Like somebody that used to be passionate about politics, but now they're like, oh, I don't want to hear it no more. Join our community. Sign up for the newsletter at themiddlegroundmike.com/newsletter. And if you want some cool gear like this or a nice, whoops, where did it go? There we go. There's the shirt. We also got some coffee mugs, got plenty of stuff on the site. Go check it out. We got our own little coffee line on there at store.themiddlegroundmike.com, because at the end of the day, this isn't just a podcast. It's a movement. No left, no right, forward, and we can only do it together.